Hello, I'm John Schwander, also known as the All Grain Gamer, and today we're going to be making a design document for KZAV, more specifically for the RTS mode. Now, I have a lot of notes out, as you can see, and this is going to be a bit ranting, a bit meandering. It's going to be the whole process of coming up with something. So there's going to be very little edits. I'll try to cut out empty space where I can. I might have to break it up into a few parts because it might be too long. But we're mostly going to start with pretty much nothing. Well, we have a lot of ideas, but we're going to work on through the whole process of creating a design document. So first off, I have my notes in the back, a few that you can't see on some dry erase boards, and just notes everywhere. We're going to first list, let me just write down, I want you to be double spaced, no lines, and we'll underline that as well. KZAV, RTS, Battle, GDD. It's going to be our start. Now, if this was going to be the whole game design document, I'd do something like name, John, 1 or 2, date, last update, and then insert date and time, update automatically, and we're going to want the most accurate so that people know when we make a change. We don't need to go into seconds, that's a bit overkill, but we want to keep this thing up to date frequently, and so we'll have very precise last updates. Contact, and then I'd have my email. That's email.com, and that would be a few more things, but we already have a design document in place, which you'll get to see more of later. It has all the stuff at the top. It has a nice table of contents. So there you go. I'm going to edit out the DE. Why would I say that? I'm going to edit that out. Okay. So I'm going to keep the email out. So we already have a bit of a GDD pretty much set up, and we're going to just add to it. So I don't want to minimize that. Just want to use this and take this away. It's just our concept title. Now we're going to put up our restrictions. And it's purely for the brainstorming process. Let's see. Real time is obviously one of our biggest restrictions. We want this to be optional in that the player does not have to do it, but if they choose to, it helps. We'll just say that. Keep it simple. Let's see. Our other restrictions. Let's say used to has some benefit. One possible benefit could be it saves resources if militia costs resources, but we haven't decided anything like that yet. So we're just going to keep it vague that there's some benefit if you help, but it's not a big enough benefit where you feel you have to do it. Let's see. At some points, militia can defend their own without player aid. I'm actually going to bullet point these so they're a bit more clear. What's one, what's not. The one type of unit restriction we have for just keeping things simple. Let's see, what's another restriction is optional, is the big one. Real time. I have to think of the restrictions for a second, so gonna be some dead space I can edit out. Let's see. Now the restriction is takes place on the overworld. So it does not get its own map. Let me actually put that in. Does not get its own map. And we wanted a mini boss leading the army. Enemy army. Right, that's our restrictions. And I want you to take a minute and think, what is our biggest factor in this? I'm just going to look at my real world notes. So the biggest thing that's going to hinder us, what I see, is this. One time of unit. That's wrong. One type of unit. So we're going to have only one type of unit for both sides. And that limits us greatly. Games that have only one type of unit, numbers become the deciding factor. We want to avoid it being a pure numbers game because that's not fun. It's just see who has the bigger number and then that person wins. So next would be placement, would be another key factor of what only having one type of unit could be used to add strategy or depth or interest into the game. So games with one type of unit. Checkers is a good example, where you both have the same number, you both have the same kind of unit, you can only do the same things, but it comes down to forcing them to make moves they don't want to make in order to get a better position. Though you can upgrade to a king and move backwards, but you don't have to do that. And now we're at our thinking process of what's been established as a restriction and what could we possibly do. So I'm going to actually put in current thoughts. I'm going to bullet point that as well. And I have a lot of ideas already thrown out there. One was kind of like a checkers and Final Fantasy Tactics kind of mix, where each unit placement was important. My laptop fan's going pretty loud right now. And they would have to... They would get action points per turn, but this would turn into more of a turn-based. Then they would shoot and reload, and each of that would take an action point, and they couldn't kill in one shot, so it's not whoever gets first shot wins. But again, that kind of puts us in a turn-based mentality. Phil has suggested making it sort of like a... Let me write that first one down. Turn-based mentality. Just see tactics like. So Phil had this idea of possibly using it sort of like a tower defense. And that's something that has potential, but we also have to be very careful because, again, we only have one type of unit. If we're too much like a tower defense, that's pretty boring. And it's also... It really takes the player out of it, but we could work with that. But again, we have to worry about this one type of unit, since having just one tower, that's not fun at all. We could... See, where's that one idea I had? And these are all... This text right here is just various notes I've taken. And with this design project, with these videos, there's of course no spoilers. We're not hiding anything. Everything has to be presented so that everyone knows what the idea is. We're not hiding our plot twists or our late features that will be unlocked. So if you want to enjoy the game when it's done as unspoiled as possible, I guess I would say, then I should have probably thrown in an earlier warning. Maybe I'll edit one in. So now I'm trying to find where I had an idea. Well, I know what it is, so I'll just write it in. One central location for defense, sort of like an HQ. Sort of like an HQ where that's all they have to worry about. That's the only place the enemy will attack, so that's less they have to... That's less the player has to keep in mind of how to defend. And that would give an ease to it. It's not too much micromanaging if it's just one location. And it would be a location that's central to the map. So that it wouldn't be too much of a hassle to go back and forth. Because that's another thing we want to avoid. I'm actually going to write that in. Avoid traveling back and forth. Because then you're trying to run off and do something, then you have to come back to fight off the militia, and then you go out and it happens again, and that's kind of that's no fun. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to make fun. So that's a little meandering of that. Let's see what else we have written. I believe these two are very close to each other, because I have not worked on militia too much. Mostly I've focused on the other parts, such as characters, many bosses, enemies, weapons, those kind of things, which you'll be able to download this when we get up to that point in the weekly podcasts. Still don't know how we're going to deal with the recruiting, but that's not important. Right now we want to think solely of how is it going to play out. I believe I actually wrote what I was talking about on one of these dashboards. dry erase boards. Yep, I did. Thought of having, here's another one, 2 RTS designs, one for hard, one for easy. So you're losing the TS. Now for this one, it was mostly just having the militia with the temples, and the temple would be where the player gets their power up. And this way, when you lose a battle, or an RTS, you just lose access to the power up for a bit of time, so that you're not too pressured to return. If you can do with that, if you feel you can do without the power up, you can just let it fall. And if you tried to defend and you lost, it's still not too big of a deal. Originally, we were thinking that you would have to reconquer a temple that was taken by the enemy, and that would lock off access to the power, or maybe you'd still have the power, but you'd have to go back in order to progress. That's one alternative to that. I think we've looked over all our notes now. Now comes the hard part. What are we going to do? And honestly, I have no idea right now. That's what we're figuring out. We could have our tower defense work like entrenched soldiers / units. Just thinking out loud pretty much right now. I'm envisioning it more as a army versus army, where once they encounter resistance, the enemy army will target the militia, rather than if we did, say, a tower defense where the enemy army follows a set path and tries to get to the temple or whatever you're trying to protect. So the enemy's goal should be to kill all the militia. I'll just say enemies. Enemy's goal. And I'm not too worried about grammar when I'm just writing thoughts. It's kind of hard to think and speak. And not only do that, but to be entertaining. really want this one type of unit. It's causing a lot of trouble. But we're going to try to tackle it head on, regardless of how much trouble. Because if there's no challenge, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you don't get better. I do like the one central location idea. Makes it simpler to make a design. Even though I just said challenge makes you learn. The problem with this turn-based mentality is that it's turn-based. I was having a lot of thoughts towards that one. If we're keeping it balanced and interactive. Well, we did cover that the player could aid. But player initiative by so one of our original concepts was that the player would sort of take control, like a general or command and conquer style of move the troops, tell them to do things, not so much build anything or build more troops. But we turn that more in favor of keeping the player as a separate entity, so they're not switching back and forth between the general character and them. Originally we wanted to have them switch back so then you could easily fight the battle and then go back to the however far you progress towards the temple on the overworld, so you didn't have to walk back and forth all the time. Or we could have used the teleport device, but that felt it wasn't in sync with the theme we were going for. So that's another factor we have to take in. Don't need that period there. I'm actually going to pause this, do some thinking, and come back. And I'm back with a document I forgot to go over. This was my design document rough, where I laid out what I needed to decide when I made my design document. So here we have militia, of all things we have to cover. Are they recruited? What do they cost? What can they do? No, we're not worried about outside of battle and inside of battle. Since they only work from the overworld, there's not really a difference. They're just going to defend. Well, it is still a concern. Do they move? Do they not? So we'll have to cover that. How the battles work, obviously. That's a pretty basic one. When do they happen? All these things we have to cover. Here's our upgrades, which will probably not take place in the current state. I'm not sure how I feel about the upgrades. They give potential for depth, but then we need the player to collect something to spend on those upgrades. The upgrades kind of change from that one unit focus. We could have it be just an overall upgrade to all the militia, though we'd like that to be visually represented, like if they have better gear it actually shows. That would require more art. So all these things we have to consider is leaning me towards no upgrades. Now we have the rest of the stuff. I'm just going to go over this just as show you guys the basics of the design. I may have gone over this in another video, but regardless, I'll show it now. We have the summary is very important. The scope. This is more towards the pitching, where you suggest your idea to investors or your boss or whoever. It's just the basics. Then you start to get into the mechanics. Still pretty basic. The controls, the camera, different sections. Combat's, of course, a big one. And pretty much every feature gets its own section and the things that will be associated with that. Then later you can see, well, actually, while we're working on one now, you'll get to see how it all pans out. So it'll probably be a long, split up into many segments video. There's a lot to cover. But once we have our idea, it generally becomes pretty easy. Now we just need the idea, and I can show you that. Now I believe I do have the enemies listed. I'm kind of hesitant to show that because I don't want to give away too much, but let's take a look. Here we go. Well, that's part of that upgrade thought process. When I'm looking at this, I'm thinking the militia and the soldiers, who would actually be the militia equivalent, just different name. So imagine recruit said soldier. Well, they shouldn't be as strong as the player. And I believe the player has the same amount of health but does a lot more damage. In fact, I can check that. And whether you're here or not, I pretty much have to. Nope, that's the wrong document. I want that one in the back. That one. Oh, you're gonna make me shuffle through them, aren't you? There we go. Move you slightly over. That works. No, that's not the one I wanted. And this where I was at. So the weapons, other stuff. Where the player health? And I'm gonna have to cut out a lot of that. Note to self: cut out a lot of that. So I want them to have less health than the player. have to think how much less health. A player should be able to one-shot militia as I currently envision it. Send them right into the aid, and there's a huge swarm of militia, and the player can just cut through them. While their own swarm of militia fights the enemy swarm. Now we're left thinking that doesn't help us any. The commander could take several hits. I think that's well represented, but we still don't have a concept. Well, we have a concept, we still don't have a design. How is battle going to take place? More to the point, what's the AI going to do? That is our overall concern right now. I should be doing the power-ups. They're so much easier. But this is something that's been haunting us for a while, and I want to get this done. I'm just envisioning it in my head of all the different styles we could be doing. The turret style, the Clash of the Swarm style, not so much the turn-based style. Pretty much giving up on that due to it being turn-based. Alright, so I think I have an idea. So here's my current idea. The player will place militia map around the HQ to a set distance, where they will remain entrenched. We're going to think of the turret style for our militia. They'll have the same strength, maybe a little. Well, we'll worry about that more in the fine-tuning. So you want to think of them like pegs in a grid. You place them, they stay there, they do their job. That gave me an even better idea. It's like, go. Now that's a turn-based game. It's kind of more about the terrain than the individual unit. So how can we make this RTS-like go? We could have the player input commands and basically write their own AI, such as puts troops to with orders of various priority. For example, let's see. And I want to clarify that a bit more. Let's see, the army starts off as a massive blob and follows the commands. For example, as priority, engage enemy army. Second priority, capture the hill. Third priority, defend HQ. And then you could shift these around. So like capture the hill would be first, and the army would move to the hill and then wait and hold it until the next command was fulfilled. Well, in turn. So like capture the hill and then engage enemy army. Capture the hill, then the army comes so close, they attack from the hill, and maybe they get a little bonus from attacking downhill. Defend HQ is last. The army could split up. We could have squads sort of play out. Use a squad system with the above. That would work probably better. Like that idea. And I have to think of what the enemy does. I really like that idea. Give some control. Then we have to make an automatic mode. Oh, that'll be dreadful. Just thinking of it now. No, not too much work, actually. I'm just exaggerating it a bit. Then we have to go through and see what is good for the automatic mode. What's optimal, but what's not best. Because if we made automatic mode best, then everyone will just use automatic mode. So let's work with this. I'm actually going to cut this and maybe do another part. Well, I'll do another part, but we're going to stop there for now.